I mean, I think it's important to direct people's attention to the first two answers that Lyndon LaRouche gives to his broadcast was just this past Friday. I'm forgetting the date. Because he goes through there, he discusses the credit system versus a monetary system, but in a way that I think something he's been hitting at over a long period of time, but I think people tend to slide off, which is in what way this coheres with the actual structure of the human species as a species versus any animal species. Now, to understand that, you've got to understand that the substance of what makes a human species human is not the visible part of what makes a human species human. If you take a look, I think the best way to see it is where, if you look at the way the Russian scientist Vladimir Vernadsky discusses time, he points out that the place you really start to see, you see a very distinct structure of time in living processes versus the non-living. That is, if you compare something like the succession of generations in animals to something like the time that you see on geological epochs uninfluenced by life on Earth, and you see there's not something, what characterizes living processes versus non-living is this succession of generations, this kind of periodicity, a boundedness in time that he identifies as being the expression of the finite but unbounded or self-bounded Riemannian space but expressed in time. That expresses this succession of generations. That's a distinct change from something like a rock, which just sort of, not only does it have no definite boundaries in space, you can chisel pieces off of it and it's still a rock. Or if you chisel a piece off a rabbit, it no longer is a living rabbit. But then also the rock can just steadily wear away over time, whereas living creatures have a definite beginning and end of their life. You get the periodicity there. But with the human species, you get, in potential, something different. You get an ability to link yourself across, to link the human intention, the willful creativity of the human individual, you can link across generations. And so you've got the ability to have a history and culture give the human species the ability to relate to other human souls, one soul to relate to other human souls as one coherent acting whole that extends beyond the boundaries of that one human lifetime. And the term we use to describe this is human immortality, not in some magical way, but in the real way that human beings manage to transcend their physical existence. Now, that's not something that's automatic. In fact, if you look at culture right now, you realize we're losing that. The last couple of generations, ours included, now the upcoming generation is going to have it worse, are losing their connection to human history. And they're losing their connection to human culture. The MySpace generation is exactly that. They've got no real living sense of personalities that came before them. They've got no real living sense of other human beings. They can't interact with other human beings. I mean, our generation, you see it expressed as an intense lack of trust, which people manage to cover up in various ways, either by being very rageful or being very reclusive or being very manipulative, but in some way expressing the fact that you lack any kind of real trust or love for your fellow man. Losing that's not only bad for the individual, but you're losing the coherence that makes that universal human system a system. And you're collapsing it into these little separate units. In the course of doing that, you lose human immortality. In a very real sense, you lose the ability to exist beyond your mortal existence, such that when your body dies, you die. The necessary measures to lock that in, though, to lock in real immortality, include a couple of things. One, like we said, history, culture, real classical humanist culture. But then you have to have some way for the human species as a species to be able to generate a concept of what a future state is that it must achieve, and then to organize all of its activity, the species activity, to achieve that future state in order to transcend the boundaries of your physical existence, of your life. That's a credit system. This is not just some interesting way to pass money back and forth. This is you ensuring that you can act in the way that only the human species can to transform the way the world around them operates, to be able to construct in a very clear way an intention of an intended future state for the whole human species, and then to be able to organize all of your economic activity to achieve that. That's the opposite of what's presented as a monetary system, which is a monetary system is based off of free trade, which is premised off of survival of the fittest, which is a model that's taken from animal models, not human models, but animal models, and which honestly doesn't even apply to them sufficiently. But to the extent that it applies to anything, it applies to the basest non-human activity. That's free trade. Human activity is a credit system. If you want to express human immortality, the immortality of the individual, and our existence as an immortal species, then you have to understand the principle of a credit system. And I'd like to direct our audience's attention to these two answers from Mr. LaRouche in this last Friday's event.